For decades, Al Pacino has been a master of the silver screen, captivating audiences with his complex roles and resolute individualism. But even when he was away from the TV, a single question lingered with him. Why hasn't one of the most famous leading males in Hollywood tied the knot? Finally, at the age of 85, Pacino has given an honest response. And nobody saw it coming. His choice transcends the typical headlines in Hollywood. It makes us reevaluate our long-held beliefs about commitment, love, and the price of fame. What Pacino has to say isn't only intimate. It's also controversial and might alter Hollywood's perception of him. It was in New York City's East Harlem that Alfredo James Pacino came into this world on April 25, 1940. Will eventually become one of Hollywood's most legendary and revered performers. His emotionally intense performances, distinctive voice, and commanding presence have made him famous. While we're in the tub, how about we start this thing rolling? Attention, turn on the lights again. Rising from obscurity in a working-class neighborhood to becoming an international superstar, Pacino owes much of his success to his dedication to acting, his training, and his perseverance. New York City, which he immersed himself in throughout his formative years as an actor, would go on to play an important supporting role in numerous of his parts and remain an integral part of his sense of self. Pacino studied method acting under the illustrious Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio from 1966 to 1969. Pacino developed the nuance and authenticity that would later characterize his acting at this stage. That doesn't add up, Judge. Turn the case back on. That is the only thing I need. He won the esteemed Obie Award for his performance in the off-Broadway play The Indian, Once the Bronx, among his many stage appearances during this time. During these formative years, I set the stage for a career that would combine intense physical activity with deep psychological understanding. His early cinematic roles showcased that blending. In 1971's The Panic in Needle Park, Pacino made his cinematic debut as a young man navigating New York City as a heroin addict. The part displayed his talent for inhabiting complicated, tormented individuals without passing judgment or resorting to theatrics, and it quickly garnered critical acclaim. Francis Ford Coppola, the film's director, was captivated by Pacino's performance and thought he could give Michael Corleone more nuance and empathy in The Godfather. Despite the initial reluctance from studio executives, that casting decision would prove to be a watershed moment in both Pacino's career and American cinema. Al Pacino's breakthrough performance occurred with the 1972 release of The Godfather. Pacino went from being the shy, reticent son of a mafia patriarch to a brutal, tyrannical boss as Michael Corleone. His subtle performance propelled him to stardom and garnered him his first Oscar nomination. Subtle and introspective, the performance left a lasting impression. In 1974, just 2 years after The Godfather Part 2, he returned to the role. Many saw this sequel as delving even farther into Michael's fall from power and seclusion. His position among Hollywood's elite was further cemented by the film, which garnered him a second Oscar nomination. Dog Day Afternoon, which Pacino starred in 1975, maintained a trend. Wartzik was a real-life bank robber whose failed theft became a dramatic, on-screen showdown. Exciting, unfiltered, open, and totally unique. That was the performance. I don't want to cause harm, and as a Catholic, I hope you understand that. Sure, no problem. Sounds safe. Sounds safe. I understand. Quizzes only, please. It validated Pacino's talent for giving humanity to characters who could otherwise be viewed as villains or social outcasts, and garnered him his third Oscar nod. The following year, 1977, he switched gears and played a race car driver in Bobby Deerfield. The picture may not have had the same effect as his earlier works, but it did show that he was willing to venture into uncharted emotional ground. The 1979 film Injustice for All starred Al Pacino as a defense attorney who grapples with the ethical dilemmas presented by the justice system. Not to mention his now famous "You're out of order" speech and passionate performance. A guy entangled in a corrupt system is captivated in the frustration and confusion of an out-of-order trial. This part was typical of his career and led to his fourth Oscar nomination. I couldn't shake the one thing that had lingered in my thoughts and refused to leave. Authentically portraying men through their crises, even when they are at conflict with the world. Tony Montana in Scarface, a part that would go on to become both iconic and controversial, was played by Al Pacino in 1983. The film's director, Brian De Palma, was at first criticized for his directing choices, who went on to amass a huge cult following. The role of the Cuban exile turned drug kingpin was dramatically acted out by Pacino. Quite different from his previous, more subdued parts, yet firmly rooted in his dedication to character. Everything you do, think, and feel is dictated to you by them. Is being cheap something you're after? Tony Montana became an enduring cultural icon, often cited and referenced in various contexts. Plus, the performance is still widely recognized as one of Pacino's best. The mid to late 1980s, though, were a time of difficulties. Between 1985 and 1990, Pacino's career took a downturn, plagued by underwhelming box office performances. When films like Revolution bombed at the box office and with critics, it appeared as though his career had hit a wall. Still, Pacino kept working and honing his art even during this slower time. Starring in the 1989 crime film Sea of Love, he made a partial return to the big screen and was reintroduced to fans in a more approachable and financially lucrative style. In 1990, with the publication of The Godfather Part 3, that revival acquired even more momentum. That Pacino reprised his role as Michael Corleone. His performance was well received, and the picture bookended one of the most influential character arcs in film history, even though it wasn't as critically successful as its predecessors. After that, 1992 was Pacino's breakout year. In Scent of a Woman, he played the role of the charming blind Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade with great conviction. A part that, after numerous nominations, ultimately brought home the Oscar for Best Actor for him. Also that year, for the incisive, dialogue-driven drama Glengarry Glen Ross, in which he played a tired, failing real estate salesperson, he was nominated, demonstrating his incredible range. I do, in fact, have an issue. Absolutely, my friend. The person who tore the joint apart is not I. The business world is my playground right now. Heat, starring Pacino and Robert De Niro, a longtime friend and acting colleague, was a watershed moment in 1995 cinema. Both actors had cameos in Godfather Part 2, but Heat was their first feature film collaboration. Michael Mann directed the picture, which starred two legendary actors in a gripping tale of a police officer and a career criminal playing cat and mouse. Their now famous diner scene is now one of the most studied parts of contemporary film acting, and the picture was financially and critically successful. Pacino maintained a steady stream of critically acclaimed television parts alongside his cinema roles throughout the 2000s. Playing a tired investigator opposite Robin Williams in the 2002 Alaskan thriller Insomnia, showcased his talent for keeping the audience on the edge of their seats with subtlety and suspense. He also received praise for his work on HBO shows. His nuanced and intense portrayal of Roy Cohn in 2003's Angels in America earned him a Primetime Emmy. There it is. A garden was my worst fear. Later on, in 2010, he bravely tackled the part of Dr. Jack Kevorkian in You Don't Know Jack. His portrayal was moving and sympathetic, demonstrating his fearlessness in taking on hard subjects. Pacino co-starred with Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci as Jimmy Hoffa, a union leader, in Martin Scorsese's 2019 film The Irishman. He received another Oscar nomination for his performance as Hoffa, which was energetic, defiant, and hilarious. Reflecting on devotion, aging, and legacy, the picture returned Pacino to his mastery of epic narrative with intricate character relationships. Additionally, he was able to reach a whole new generation of viewers all around the world thanks to Netflix. There is no indication that Pacino will be walking away from the limelight in the 2020s. In the Amazon series Hunters, which ran from 2020 to 2023, he portrayed a Holocaust survivor who, in the 1970s, America led a group in their quest for Nazis. He got to play an older, haunted, aggressive, and driven character type on the program, which was a change of pace for him. He still considers acting to be an ongoing art form rather than a finished product, and he keeps in touch with the stage by taking part in occasional film productions and readings. The intensity, criticisms, and career slumps of Al Pacino. Even as Al Pacino's career spanned 5 decades, his unwavering dedication to method acting stood out as a hallmark of his work. Does it seem simple to you? Dad, I have to keep them cool. If I want to keep you all happy, I have to. When Pacino first began studying acting with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, he firmly believed in completely immersing himself in the role. During the grueling filming process, he frequently became his personas, blurring the distinctions between actor and role. The performances that have emerged from this immersive technique are generally considered to be among the most impactful in cinematic history. But there have been tales hidden underneath the praise. Accounts of instances where the constraints of teamwork on set were tested by this same level of intensity. Rumor has it that Pacino carries the emotional and psychological burden of his parts even between takes, staying in character even when the camera is not rolling. Directors who have worked with him have lauded his passion, yet it has often caused friction. Due to his conviction in remaining faithful to the character and the script, Pacino has occasionally argued with producers or directors over creative ideas. These incidents did shape a reputation, even though they never became public scandals. Pacino was not being ostentatious. He was quite picky since he was invested in the job. There is a price to pay for authenticity. Long, emotionally draining days on set were common due to his immersive technique, which was a blessing to his audience. According to Pacino's co-stars and directors, he may be so immersed in his parts that he comes across as cold and unapproachable at times. This, however, is what they agree makes him unique. Pacino has always sought the truth in an industry where many go for fame. However, the same level of commitment that garnered him praise for his work in films such as The Godfather and Dog Day Afternoon has also, in the course of history, added to a different story, that of the challenging genius. But by the late 1980s, Pacino was facing problems that had nothing to do with creative differences. They centered on keeping creative momentum going. The second part of the 1980s was a noteworthy dip for Pacino's career, following a string of wins in the 1970s and early 1980s. Revolution, 1985, which received harsh criticism for its directing and acting, was a turning point. Despite the actor's once unshakable reputation, the film's underwhelming box receipts and reviews left critics and fans bewildered. It wasn't a total bust, but it did mark a change in how things were seen. Now that Pacino's acting chops were in question, the real issue was which roles would best highlight his abilities. In the middle of the 2000s, when Pacino's films received mixed to poor reviews, these issues came up again. Righteous Kill, 2008, 88 Minutes, 2007, and Two for the Money, 2005, were all critically panned. The plots were predictable most of the time, the characters were flat, and some critics felt that Pacino's performances lacked the nuance that he had been famous for. Instead, what was noticeable and unsettling at times were the hyperbolic vocal expressions, the passionate monologues, and the explosive outbursts that had enthralled audiences in the past, but now seemed like self-parody to others. These performances added fuel to the fire of the widespread belief that Pacino had grown too dependent on his shouty persona, exemplified most notably by his "wah" outburst when he smells a lady. Some reviewers started to perceive what was previously a strong demonstration of emotion as approaching caricature. An ongoing argument emerged in the film community when critics started to wonder if the renowned actor was relying too much on his famed methods, which could diminish the effect of his earlier, more restrained performances. Pacino seemed to be coasting on his legacy rather than actively seeking out challenging assignments. The groundbreaking contributions Pacino made to modern cinema are indelible, regardless of a few slip-ups or mediocre performances. He was still unmatched in the screen presence department, even when he was having a bad day. Producers were still interested in collaborating with him, and viewers weren't tired of seeing his work. Rather than a loss of talent, these trying years may have shown a struggle between following one's creative instincts and meeting the expectations placed on one by one's enormous legacy. Some of the harsher comments started to fade as time went on. His later works started to be rediscovered with greater acclaim by both audiences and critics. For example, people were reminded of Pacino's abilities in The Irishman, 2019 by his performance, which was bolstered by good material and imaginative directing. His Jimmy Hoffa was multi-layered, vulnerable, and incredibly human. This is more evidence that Pacino's skill has not faded despite his string of unsuccessful films. It also proved that, with the correct story and crew, the passion he always brings to his performances can still work wonders. Even though Al Pacino has tried to quit smoking, he continues to smoke cigars. Lots of people have talked about Al Pacino's method acting intensity and his career highs and lows, but there's another side to his biography that people rarely talk about, and that's the personal struggles he's had to overcome. A lifetime struggle with an addiction that was as ubiquitous in Hollywood as cameras and screenplays for decades hides below the limelight and the accolades for his stunning performances. In his personal life and in many of his most famous parts, Pacino's habit of smoking heavily was evident, as it was for many of his contemporaries. Among those in the entertainment world, smoking was almost glorified during his peak because of how normalized it was. Cigarettes were a symbol of toughness, rebellion, and edginess. For characters beset by internal strife, they became visual shorthand, outside threat, or strong feelings. It was easy to accept Pacino's habit of smoking while on screen in this cultural setting. Whether he was portraying a tired detective, a ruthless criminal, or a troubled attorney, Pacino's cigarette habit seemed more like an integral part of his character's identity. The health effects of smoking, particularly for popular people like Pacino, came under further scrutiny as time went on and public opinion toward smoking shifted. Medical studies confirmed the grave dangers of long-term tobacco use, and public awareness of these effects increased. It shifted from being a symbol of rough masculinity or cinematic flair to a potentially harmful addiction with lasting effects. It became more difficult to disregard the personal cost of smoking when these cultural views changed. The choice to stop smoking was Pacino's own doing. It wasn't in response to demands from the public or an effort to rebrand himself. Rather, it was a result of his growing self-awareness regarding his health and the fact that he knew the habit may harm him physically and make it impossible for him to continue doing the job he loved. He had probably built up the effects on his body from decades of smoking. Although Pacino has been tight-lipped about his health issues, quitting smoking was a definite statement. It was not about how things looked. The goal was to secure his survival so that he could maintain his high standard of living and professional performance for the foreseeable future. The decision to stop smoking was a watershed moment. Changing one's way of life in this way reflects a more widespread understanding of the difficulties of aging in a field that requires a lot of physical and mental resilience. Pacino's choice mirrored the truth that legendary performers, like everyone else, had to change to stay relevant. Although this modification was deeply personal, it did highlight the subtle self-control that had contributed to his long life. Pacino has consistently demonstrated a strong dedication to his art and the pursuit of artistic longevity, even if he frequently portrayed characters who were defiant and unpredictable. Having said that, I did not completely abstain from tobacco after making that decision. Curiously, Pacino maintained his use of cigars for specific parts, seemingly balancing his personal health with the demands of his job. Although these appearances were far less common than when he smoked cigarettes, they nonetheless managed to garner attention. If Pacino wanted to really bring a character to life, whether it was in a period piece or a role that required them, he would occasionally incorporate cigars into his performance. People started talking about how acting, authenticity, and health are all intertwined because of this practice. Complex and serious questions were posed by it. To what extent can an actor achieve realism? Should one ever put one's health on the back burner to fulfill a role? And who is accountable, if anyone? What options does a famous actor have when his role calls for actions that are now understood to be harmful? Neither of these arguments was theoretical. Because of his iconic reputation, Pacino was able to contribute to a broader cultural dialogue. Not because he openly supported smoking, which he did not do, but because his decisions inevitably had an impact. Viewers, particularly diehards who had been there since his 1970s raw performances to his more contemporary work, found solace in the image of him smoking a cigar on TV. Was this the actor's way of coping with tradition and habit, or merely another weapon in his arsenal? In addition, his voice, one of his most distinctive features, became entangled with his complicated past of smoking. The gravelly, worn vocal tone that Pacino developed over the years became instantly recognizable. Instantly recognizable, often mimicked, and inextricably linked to his on-screen persona. Some have wondered if that noise was caused by someone's long history of smoking. Even though we don't know for sure, the supposition shows how much people associate his appearance with his vices. Whether influenced by smoking, age, or emotion, the voice carries history, much like the parts he has portrayed. To this day, it is one of the show-stopping elements of his presentations. In 2015, Al Pacino was involved in a legal battle for back-end revenues. Quitting smoking for health reasons and dealing with aging as a working actor were just two examples of the personal decisions that Al Pacino made over his long and illustrious career that demonstrated a strong sense of professionalism and self-preservation. Although Pacino has spent decades managing the financial side of Hollywood, his journey has nevertheless featured obstacles even when he is not acting or performing. In addition to the art and imagination, the entertainment industry is a realm of discussions, contracts, and financial struggles. There are a lot of moving parts for an actor of Pacino's caliber, including control, pay, and performance. In addition to his iconic roles, he has built a reputation for standing hard in his pursuit of royalties and other forms of compensation for his work, especially in relation to the financing and distribution of blockbuster films. The Godfather Part 3 and Heat, two major projects in his career, are prime examples of this unseen side of his work. One was the highly anticipated third installment in a renowned trilogy, and the other was a thunderous crime thriller featuring Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in a scene that will go down in cinematic history as one of the most iconic duets of all time. Pacino was well aware of the pivotal role he played in the commercial success of both films. Consequently, he allegedly fought tooth and nail for what are known as back-end profits, or rewards from a film's sales after its release, instead of a mere upfront salary. Negotiations of this like were par for the course for a celebrity of his stature. A lot of the time, the best actors get paychecks that reflect the monetary impact of their work in the long run through back-end deals. The pursuit of back-end revenues was about more than simply money for Pacino. He sought a fair wage that reflected the popularity of the films because he thought his labor was crucial to their success. There were no official lawsuits associated with these discussions, however, reports that this aggressiveness caused some friction with studios. The productions continued uninterrupted by any public disturbances since any disputes were maintained behind closed doors. Rumors of fights still show an aspect of Hollywood that audiences seldom witness. The intricate web of financial agreements that decide who gets rich off of a project. It is to be expected that Pacino would strive to have his accomplishments duly recognized, given the widespread acclaim for his roles in Heat and the Godfather films. These talks demonstrate a bravery to confront corporate opposition head-on and an astute comprehension of the industry's financial mechanisms. He was more than just a mouthpiece for the script. He was instrumental in the success of the picture. With the same level of commitment he displayed in his tasks, he tackled the business aspect of his job. But Pacino's financial activities weren't always that understated. His long-standing talent agency, ICM International Creative Management, sued him in 2015, making the situation more public. The agency asserted its right to commission payments, which sparked the legal conflict. While the media did not devote much coverage to the lawsuit, it seemed that issues over pay schemes and unpaid fees relating to Pacino's professional earnings were at the heart of the matter. Hollywood is no stranger to legal battles between agents and their clients, particularly in cases involving multi-project collaborations and intricate financial agreements. Quietly, the matter was resolved in the end, without any public scrutiny or ceremony. It seems like the parties involved would rather not deal with the hassle and potential fallout of a drawn-out legal struggle by settling out of court quietly. Resolving the argument efficiently allowed Pacino to continue focused on his work without distractions, so it was likely a sensible move for him. It appears that this case had little to no long-term effect on his career or public image, despite the fact that litigation can be detrimental to reputations. More than anything, it was a sobering reminder that playing at a high level for decades brings its fair share of legal and logistical challenges, even for the most accomplished actors. There was no scandal or wrongdoing at the heart of either the lawsuit or the back-end negotiations. On the contrary, they mirror the inherent intricacies of a long career in show industry. Contract and profit disagreements are practically inevitable when an actor like Pacino has been in so many big films. His memory remains untarnished by these circumstances. Rather, they represent the industry's elite performers in all their glory. An amazing performance would not be possible without the discussions, contracts, and agreements that precede it. The eagerness of Pacino to participate in that aspect of the company, his ability to establish himself, at times in a controversial manner, has contributed to his long-term career control. His confidence in economic dealings is indicative of a larger concept that has characterized Pacino's approach: autonomy. His artistic and personal integrity have always been prioritized in his decisions, whether he is on set, performing, or negotiating. No amount of societal pressure, peer pressure, or even the demands of his employer can sway him. In an industry that frequently attempts to mold actors into predictable molds, that sense of control has served him well. Pacino has built out a niche for himself in the entertainment industry by skillfully balancing his artistic fervor with his commercial savvy. This allows him to give emotionally charged performances while simultaneously safeguarding his interests behind the scenes. Why 85-year-old Al Pacino claims he'll never tie the knot. Numerous people are still very interested in Al Pacino's life, even after all these years of dealing with the stresses of stardom, demanding jobs, private health decisions, and even behind-the-scenes legal battles. Everyone seems to be talking about him and his every action, whether it's in his personal life or at work. I have always found his decision to never get married to be the most peculiar and puzzling component of his life. At 85 years of age, Pacino has made a rare confession about his life outside of marriage, revealing the real man behind some of Hollywood's most iconic characters. In contrast to many of his contemporaries, Pacino has chosen to keep his private life out of the public eye during his many years in the spotlight. He is a father and has been in multiple public relationships, but he has never tied the knot. Many years of conjecture and heated debate have been sparked by this choice. Was it an irrational dread of committing, an unhealthy obsession with work at the expense of family, or something else entirely? Pacino approached the topic in a recent interview with an honest blend of contemplation and candor. His statement started with, "I never say never, but now I know why I passed." Neither bitterness nor dismissal was in his comments. Rather, they started from a place of knowing themselves. According to him, although he has experienced profound love and wonderful relationships, he never felt ready for the commitment of marriage. It turns out that Pacino's decision was never about turning down love, as this rare statement reveals. Instead of learning what kind of life worked best for him, not because he is selfish, but because he needs space to keep his creative juices flowing, he has often said. The actor sacrifices a lot of who they are, he said. Occasionally, a spouse may not have enough of what is left. This outlook, which may be hard to understand for some, has shaped his relationships. I didn't want to give someone just a portion of who I am. Pacino has expressed his joy at becoming a father and has fathered children. Being a father altered my life, he once remarked. It provided me with an excuse to step out of my role. On the other hand, he was never one to feel the draw of a permanent marriage routine. Marriage was revealed to me. I beheld its exquisiteness. Personally, though, I could also see the constraints. I also preferred not to make a commitment that I knew I wouldn't be able to keep. His openness betrays a guy who has spent a lifetime contemplating the consequences of his decisions, both professionally and personally. Although many people find security and comfort in marriage, Pacino had a different view. To him, it was just another framework that clashed with his identity. He stressed that it had nothing to do with disbelief in love. Integrity is at the heart of the matter. Regarding my abilities, I have always done my best to be forthright. His words carry more emotional weight because he confesses now, at 85 years old. He expressed it simply. I don't regret not getting married because I lived how I needed to live. Looking back on his life, he can see towering performances, personal highs and lows, and choices that defined him. In my opinion, that is the most that any of us can hope for. The intricacies of his journey remain, even with that acceptance. Pacino has acknowledged experiencing periods of solitude. Those times when you felt the weight of not having a life companion. There were nights when I wished there was someone beside me who knew everything about me, who had walked through it all with me, he admitted. But then I would think, maybe that kind of closeness wasn't meant for me. Looking into the mirror, he saw not only a successful career, but also a life defined by intentional, though surprising, decisions. Throughout his career, Pacino defied expectations. It has become a distinguishing characteristic of his to not comply, whether in his personal life or during performances. He wondered if he could have tied the knot.